Hi, I'm Heather, and I have a new video featuring one of the stamps from Penny Black's new Making Spirits Bright release. I'm working on hot press watercolor paper, and before I started filming I splattered masking fluid over the panel, some little blots and some big blots, so that's going to look like snow at the end of the project when I rub that off. The first thing I'm going to do on my watercolor panel is just make a pale background. So I'm smushing some ink onto the glass mat, adding water, and then I'm just going to swipe that panel through the ink. I want it to be pale, so I'm not looking for bold color. So even once I've smushed it, I'm going to dilute it even more by spraying water on it. Dabbing it out takes away some of the color as well, but you can see I've got a pale background there, which will add a little bit of interest to my finished project. This is the Merriest stamp from Penny Black, and it's got a bunch of foliage on it, some berries, some kind of pine or some needly sort of leaves, and then some smoother leaves. I'm using a few different green inks, starting with eucalyptus from Catherine Pooler on those kind of fern, needly type leaves on the edges. And then right on the tips, I'm adding just a dab of spruce ink. It's a darker green. So I'll have two tones on those leaves. Give it just a couple of spritzes of water before I stamp so that those inks can start blending together a little bit on the stamp before they hit the paper. Then I can see if I want to reapply any of that ink to make those leaves any bolder. When I'm inking and stamping like this, I just keep a wet cloth by my side. Damp, not soaking wet, because I don't want the stamp to have drops of water on it. But I use that to remove ink from the places where I don't want it. And that may seem like extra work, double work, but it works quite well. And that way I can ink the stamp with a large ink pad and then just remove what I don't want. One of the reasons that I may not be getting a perfect impression there is because there's masking fluid on the panel as well. So it might not be my inking, it might be because there are drops of masking fluid. Now, of course, to do these berries, I really needed to switch over to a marker. So I'm using the Royal Blue marker from Karen, and these markers are very juicy. So I'm get a nice bold blue color for my berries. I've been using less traditional color schemes for my Christmas cards this year, so that's why I've got blueberries there. But before I stamp them, I'm going to blend these lighter leaves and just fill in the shape of each leaf. As you can see, I'm using the ink that's already on the panel, but if I need more ink, I can pick up some smushed ink and use that to fill out these leaves also. I'm going to dry that because when I stamp those berries, I don't want them to bleed into the place where I just blended. Now that ink was sitting on the stamp for the whole time when I was blending those leaves, so I just gave it a spritz of water and stamped again to get it juicier. Maybe a little too much water, but the overall effect is fine. I've got some bright blueberries. I'm just using a ground espresso marker to make the stems more prominent. With all the stamping done, I just want to do a little bit more blending of those leaves, fill in any parts of the leaf that isn't really showing up, and I can do that with a little bit of extra ink. You can see that I've stamped this off one edge of the panel. I'm going to stamp it again off another edge and fill like 3/4 of my panel, just leaving a space for a sentiment. I've repositioned the stamp and I'm going to do the berries first this time. It didn't end up making too much difference. These two methods, these two orders, sometimes it does, but this time it didn't. Doing the berries first worked fine. And once you become more familiar with the pattern on one of these brushstroke stamps, you'll find it easier to ink the little sections of leaves and berries, that sort of thing. It can be tricky, but I find to just even put the stamp on an angle so the light hits it differently, I can see where a berry ends and a leaf starts. Now often I will dry the panel in between different ink colors, and you don't always see that. Sometimes I remove that from the video footage, but if I'm stamping an area adjacent to where I just stamped and the ink might still be wet, I'll just quickly dry the panel so one color ink doesn't bleed straight into another color. Unless, of course, I want the colors to bleed, which is something I also enjoy doing. So once again, I'm just going to blend out these little leaves with water and a little bit of the same ink to make them a little bit more prominent. To fill out this design just a little bit more, I'm using some of these twiggy branches from the Fragile Beauty set, and I'm going to ink them in brown, Icing on the Cake from Catherine Pooler, and just add a little more interest to the design with some very simple brown stamping. Now these little branches actually outline, not solid or brush stroke, so I'm wanting to make them look solid. So that's why I've grabbed a really fine brush to blend. And I'm doing this really slowly and carefully. I speed up most of the footage in the videos somewhat, but I wanted you to see that I don't have like the steadiest hand in the world and just zip, 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 do my painting. I wanted you to see actual speed. Now I've sped it, it's double speed. So just wanted you to know I am not a super speedy painter, and to get things to stay inside the lines, in this case, I do have to go slowly and carefully. Just like the added bit of interest and texture that these little twiggy branches add. I'm definitely using this as a Christmas card, but you can see from these colors that you could make this you could use this stamp any time of year. The foliage is really pretty. I'm removing the masking fluid now, so revealing some little white dots here and there. Some of them are on the leaves and berries, but some of them are in that pale background, which adds interest to that too. I want to make it look like there is snow on the top of the berries, so I'm using white gouache paint. I tried with a white gel pen, but it was soaking into the stamped ink, the dye ink, so I'm using the white gouache because that will sit on top. And it just makes it look a little bit more wintry with a bit of snow on the top of each berry. I've decided on green splatter here and there around the panel. And then all that's left is to add a sentiment from the Light of Christmas set in this space here. I'm stamping it with VersaFine ink. That's what I often do for sentiments because the stamp is very fine lines and the VersaFine does a beautiful job. And the Shady Lane ink coordinates with the rest of the colours that I used. Thanks for joining me. I have more videos with the new release stamps from Penny Black. I'll see you again soon.